Hello everyone, it's David again on Season 1, lucky number 13, Signs and Portents. Now, I know I say that this episode is important, but this episode is truly important enough so that as you get the DVD collection, at the bottom of the DVD collection, it says Signs and Portents. So, to say that this is important is an it really is important to, and it helps to set up a lot of the next, I would say, two and a half seasons of Babylon 5. So, we start off in Ivanova's quarters, and she's woken up by the alarm system. And Ivanova says, "Why does my mouth taste like old carpet in the morning?" And all of a sudden, the alarm says, "Don't know, checking medical logs." You know, like one of those very handy personal, or like Alexa or Google, when you ask it a question. Like I ask Google, "Where are you?" Just so I can hear it talking, so I can find my cell phone, and it goes on to this big long rant about where you can find Google. Switches over to Star Fury, being chased and hit by raiders, and all of a sudden, unfortunately, for this poor guy, he is killed in action by the Star Raiders. So we cue the entrance. Now we start off by a very, very extremely important introduction. Mr. Morden, the arch nemesis, or the highest ranked arch nemesis, I think, of the Babylon 5 universe, he arrives. Now, he started off, you will of course remember, as someone named Guerrera, I should say, in the pilot episode. Now, all of a sudden, here he is, he shows up. Now, why doesn't anybody recognize him? I'm not sure that there's been a satisfactory explanation. Maybe certainly the Shadows could have provided him with alternate name and some other stuff, but, I mean, someone doesn't recognize his face, say, "Hey, I used to serve with you. What happened to you, buddy?" But anyways, so he checks in with the customs agent, and the customs agent asks him, "Where have you been exploring?" He's been, "Well, I've been out on the rim." Now, of course, we all know what he was doing, and he was going to Zahadum. Or, he didn't realize it at the time, but that's where he wound up. A guy asks, "Did you see anything interesting?" And he's like, "Yes." So this is kind of how it sets up the introduction of the Shadows. Mr. Morden was out there with a survey ship, and they ended up waking up the Shadows on Zahadum. Now, my question is, and from what I can tell from some of the stuff that I've seen on the new Babylon 5 reboot, John Sheridan is the one who is out exploring on the rim, and he wakes up a species that's been dormant for 1,000,000 years. Now, we're all probably guessing that it's the Shadows that he wakes up, but it would be interesting because we all know the Shadows weren't dormant for 1,000,000 years. Okay, they were dormant for 1,000 years, but I digress, as Ma used to say. But if you have any theories on that, is, the new reboot, is that going to follow this old script to the letter? Of course, then the question becomes what happens with Commander Sinclair. Or does Sinclair, are we just going to skip him and leave him to the ages, and just go right for John Sheridan and have him pick up everything? Anyway, skip on over. They're talking, Sinclair and I think Garibaldi and Ivanova. they've been noticing that the raiders have increased their attacks near Babylon 5. And so they kind of talk about what they're going to do and how they're going to deal with these raider attacks near Babylon 5. As Ivanova leaves, Sinclair pulls Michael Garibaldi, says, I need help and I need a friend. So Michael Garibaldi says, well, of course, you've got both. So Sinclair kind of debriefs him on what he remembers happened at the Battle of the Line and asks Garibaldi if he can try and pick up the scent, as he will, and help him figure out what happened to him for the 24 hours that he doesn't remember at the Battle of the Line. We flip on over to somewhere in the Zocalo, I believe, and Londo takes possession of the Eye, which is a jewel that was evidently the property of the very first emperor. It was lost over 100 years ago. And he's asked the guy, I'd like very much to know how you got it. And he's like, no, you don't. And the guy gets up and leaves. Now, were these guys shadow agents? Don't know. If you've got any theories on that, I would really love to hear it in the summary section. I tend to believe that, yes, these guys are shadow agents. And that they are setting up Londo. Go on over. Here's Londo and Jakar. They try and get onto an elevator, but they end up getting in a fight with each other, while this one guy is literally stuck between the two of them, trading insults. Lots of memes were spit out. I'll have you go ahead and watch that, rewatch that. Just to, you can just tell lots of memes were had between the two of them. Something about a famine in southern hemisphere of Narn. Talks about helping out, weeding out the excess population, and some other good memes that you might remember. That's where this happened. Jumping on back, and Sinclair's finishing up, telling Garibaldi about his a little 24 hours he couldn't remember, and he's certain that Delenn was there at the Battle of the Line. So, it seems to me, he's basically figuring out, and we all know now that Delenn was in fact a Satai, and she was there at the Battle of the Line. So, Morden. This is where he starts going around and asking the ambassadors the infamous, what do you want question. It's the first time we hear this question posed like this. Morden asks Jakar, what do you want? And he wants to destroy the Centauri. And a lot of people have said, hey, why wasn't this good enough for the Shadows? An implacable enemy that they want to destroy and annihilate. But then the question becomes, and then what? The Shadows are determined to have, the entire universe under their thumb, except for maybe the Vorlon homeworld. Just beat them on back till they only exist on the Vorlon homeworld, and then the Vorlons will finally know who was right in their upcoming war of, who are you and what do you want? And the same thing with the Vorlons. We'll destroy you on every single world except Zahadum, and then you'll finally know we were the right ones. So, but anyways, that's basically the consensus on Morden asking Jakar and why the Shadows did not ally themselves with the Narns instead of the Centauri. Plus, history has, and we found out later that there's other little tidbits as to why that happened. A Centauri liner arrives with Lord Kiro and the prophetess of the house. And of course, she starts off right away having visions of Babylon 5's destruction and passing out. Now, at the end of it, when she sees the implosion or explosion of Babylon 5, etc., etc., most people say, and I tend to agree with it, that what she really saw was, in fact, the actual destruction of Babylon 5, as seen. It was supposed to be at the end of Season 4, but they moved it, since they were granted a Season 5, to the ending of that, when the mechanical worker, who we also know is J. Michael Straczynski himself, hits the final switch, the last shuttle moves out, and the whole thing is destroyed on purpose to prevent Babylon 5 from becoming a hindrance to traffic. So, jumping on back in time, Lord Kiro says, she said when I was a year old that I was going to be killed by shadows. And he starts laughing and says, doesn't really make any sense, does it? Well, we all know that yes, it does make a lot of sense. Lots of moving parts into play here. Mr. Morden talks to Delenn, and to me is somewhat of a weird conversation. She gets faint, and suddenly a gray triangle appears on her forehead. Now, what is exactly that gray triangle? Is that a symbol of something? It pops up and then goes away, and it seems to be that, or is that like Harry Potter's little thing there? She all of a sudden gets faint as she's talking to Mr. Morden, and he's asking the, what do you want question of all the ambassadors. As she turns around, Mr. Morden turns like the whole background, I should say, turns completely black, and she realizes, oh crap, the shadows have made their grand appearance, or are starting to make their grand appearance, and she promptly orders Mr. Morden out of the room. It makes you wonder if the shadows realized what Delenn, that Delenn all of a sudden realizes, here comes the ancient enemy. And in fact, she says, as he's left, they're here, kind of like, the old poltergeist thing, they're here. Any of you 80s, I think it was, or maybe it was late 70s, that's a Easter egg on back to that infamous line, they're here, when they were asking a little girl, who's here, and poltergeist in the television set. Jumping on back to Babylon 5, Lord Kiro is trying to enlist the help of Mollari, thinking maybe with this eye he can regain the throne, or make a stake on the claim to the throne. And Mollari says, without any support on the inside, you'd be dead within 24 hours. Jumping on back to Raiders, they have an attack near Babylon 5. She takes off with Delta Wing. And because part of the problem is they can't figure out how these Raiders are getting in and out so quickly. They shouldn't have time to make it to a jump point, and they're too small to make their own jump point, yet they're getting in and out in record time. How are they doing this? Well, we'll find out very shortly. As this goes on, we see Kosh, his transport arrives. Mr. Morden very nearly has a direct meeting with him, but he kind of hides around the corner once he realizes Kosh is arrived. Next, we see Londo Mollari, and he's kind of in a rush, and he meets Mr. Morden near an elevator. And he asks Mr. Morden in a hurry, what do you want, dude? And Mr. Morden replies, that's just what I was going to ask you. And then he goes into a soliloquy about a renaissance of power. I want it all back the way that it was. And that, plus the history of the Centauri with the shadows, kind of cements the shadows wanting to bring the Centauri on board early on in their quest, or their conquest for power. That, I see we're going to go after the Centauri first, just like we've had history with them in the past. And so, we flip on over to Lord Kiro and some friends trying to go to a Centauri transport. That's what they called that little blue thing. And right when they're about to go board it, a man comes up, kills the Centauri guards, and seizes the eye. Now, we think that this guy is part and parcel with the Raiders and are acting on their own. We will find out differently very shortly. We flip on over to Command and Control. All of a sudden, lo and behold, Lieutenant David Corwin makes his first appearance. And he will gradually become a recurring character in the Babylon 5 universe. So, we flip on over, and there's a Lady Ladira as this guy grabs the eye and takes Lord Kiro hostage. They go on board, and all of a sudden Lady Ladira starts, "The shadows are coming for him." Well, he thought it was kind of a ridiculous prophecy when he was a little kid. Sadly, he's going to learn, much to his chagrin, that it was not a ridiculous little prophecy. As we join the battle, the raiders that have attacked kind of close to Babylon 5, they all of a sudden turn around and head back. Ivanova wants to pursue. Sinclair realizes, wait a minute, this is kind of a trap. They're trying to lead us away when in fact they're hitting close to home. So he tells Ivanova, nope, I want you to turn around and come back. At the same time, all of a sudden we see Michael Garibaldi. He's taking a starfighter wing, and he tries to intercept the raiders that have appeared near home. All of a sudden, basically what happens is the raiders' mothership, they finally have a mothership now, they open a jump point and they launch more raiders to attack Babylon 5 itself. Now all of a sudden, we're getting sandwiched in by these raiders. Sure enough, Babylon 5 goes to level 1 alert and activates the defense grids. While that is all going on, Morden gets confronted by Kosh, where Kosh says, "Leave this place, they are not for you, leave now." And cue on back. You start to see a lot of the CGI that kind of made Babylon 5 famous back in the 90s. Good CGI effects for then, quaint by today's standards. So if anyone can talk a little bit more on that, because I'm not quite so good with a lot of the technical CGI aspects of it. People want to talk on that. That would be a really good subject in the comment section to talk about how, for that point in time, the CGI was groundbreaking, but in today's world, it's quaint. That's going on, 25 years now, I believe, since Babylon 5 came out. So, what do you expect the CGI is going to look like with the reboot? That would also be another interesting thing to talk about, is what kind of CGI we can expect in this new series. So, we start, let's see here, in battle. B5 starts to engage in battles with the raiders, and the mothership is forced to retreat. All of a sudden, as things appear to be winding down, Michael Garibaldi had successfully engaged the raiders. As the raiders were going to head towards the jump gate, Ivanova suddenly comes out of the jump gate, forces the raiders right on down Babylon 5's line of fire. Babylon 5 picks off the remainder of the raiders. As we go through, and they're kind of winding down and debriefing, we find a little tidbit that Kosh needs equipment to fix his encounter suit. Now, we do know that the Shadows are capable of killing Kosh. Why didn't the Shadows just kill Kosh right at this point in time? So, are they still holding on a little bit to the rules of engagement that the Shadows and Vorlon supposedly had? You know, don't know. The mothership is taking off in hyperspace, or actually just comes out of hyperspace. Kiro is revealed as a conspirator, but he's betrayed. He thinks that since he helped these guys get away with the Eye, they were supposed to help him take control of the Centauri government with the Eye. Well, the Raiders knew that they couldn't take control of the Centauri government with just one ship. But they said, you know, with all the money and everything that we've got, we can replace all the fighters on this ship and maybe even buy 1 or 2 more ships. And we're going to send you home with the Eye. And guess what? As soon as you get home, well, the Centauri government's, number 1, going to pay us a ransom to get you back. And number 2, you're going to pay us a little bit of money every so often for us to keep our mouths shut, because you wouldn't want it to get back to the Emperor that, yes, he actively tried to overthrow the Centauri government. However, in this one I've got in big stars marked all over here, because this is the very first time we get to see a shadow vessel. Shadow vessel shows up. Luckily, that's without the little scratch. It's some just, you know, it sounds like fingers on a chalkboard. Shows up and destroys the Raider ship. As we know, the Shadows get the Eye back. And as this is going on, Lady Ladira is looking at a cup of coffee that she had picked up as she's trying to debrief Sinclair as to what, you know, her premonitions and everything were. Anyway, she's looking at the bottom of this coffee cup. She sees a shadow vessel show up and kill Lord Kiro, and she freaks out and drops it. Heavily memmed, which is why I mention it. All of a sudden, we hear Londo Mollari's doorbell chime go off. He opens it up. Mr. Morden walks in. Has a gift from friends you don't know you have. He puts it down, and there's the Eye. Now, Londo was fixing, since the Eye was lost on his watch, he was fixing to get summoned home from Centauri Prime and put on an early retirement. Of course, not knowing that Lord Kiro was in possession of it the whole time. Anyway, another little thing that Londo says that is heavily memmed: let me buy you a drink, let me buy you a fleet of drinks. So, we go back, and Michael Garibaldi shares a little tidbit of information with Commander Sinclair, that he was deliberately picked by the Minbari to run Babylon5. The Minbari agreed to sign up with Babylon5 on the proviso that they had choice over who to run this place. And they were given a list of names, and they kept going on down the list, down the list, down the list, until they came to Commander Sinclair. And that's the one that they circled, say, we'll take this guy. And Sinclair off to Babylon5 she goes. Jumping on back a little bit, we see Lady Ladira sharing her vision with Commander Sinclair about Babylon5 blowing up, because Sinclair's like, look, the Raider ship was destroyed, Babylon5's okay, we survived the battle. But she said, the vision, Commander, is still there. It makes you wonder, too, when they came up with the actual episode, because we know that J. Michael Straczynski had all 5 years of Babylon 5 kind of neatly mapped out, and at the end of season 4, I guess, roughly is when this should have happened. But, so there's a little bit of discongruity in the timeline, I guess, as to when this happened. So, anyway, she kind of puts her hand on his head in the Vulcan mind meld, or at least the Centauri version of it. She shares the memory with him. So, anyways, action episode, signs and portents, sign of things to come, heavily memmed. If you like CGI and you like battle scenes, this is a good one to start out on. Anyways, hope you all have a good rest of your evening. And as always, like, comment, subscribe, and share.